Hello everyone, and welcome to this video lesson in which we're going to address plagiarism, what it is and how to avoid it. In this video we're going to go through the following topics. First, to define what plagiarism is, and then go into ways to avoid plagiarism. We're going to look at some examples, and we're going to end up closing with some plagiarism check tools. So I think we all understand more or less what plagiarism is, but to be sure that we're on the same page, let's find a definition that we can use for this lesson. So according to the Cambridge Dictionary, plagiarism is to use, to plagiarize, is to use another person's ideas or work pretending that it is your own. Maybe to add some details or some elements to this definition, we need to clarify that intellectual property is protected by laws in different countries and by, of course, university regulations. And plagiarism is considered an academic misconduct, but also a crime, a legal crime. We will see now how to avoid plagiarism, but of course the best way to avoid plagiarism is acknowledging the authorship of our references. When we think of plagiarism, many times we think of copying and pasting directly a text, and this is of course plagiarism. It's the most clear example, but there's different ways and different levels of plagiarism. In this scale we have different conducts that could be considered plagiarism, that go from copying and pasting directly, but there's many other levels. No, for example, if you pay someone for work and present it as yours, it is also considered plagiarism. But also representing translated texts as original, or ideas. Of course, text we saw, no, but the same with data, with figures, with tables. If we do it without referencing the authorship, we're presenting them as original, and we're basically plagiarizing. Same as if we're summarizing, so if we're just presenting the idea, not the text directly, but if we're using someone else's idea or someone else's conclusions without acknowledgement, then it is plagiarism. You can also, in one of the last points, you see if you present your own work, but you present it as new, so if you're kind of reusing your materials, it is also considered plagiarism. It's a different kind of plagiarism. It's called self-plagiarism. And then the two last examples that we see here is, for example, plagiarism would be to attribute yourself the work of a team, of a whole team, or excluding one of the co-authors, so just mentioning your name. And the last one is maybe the most interesting one, and the one that we will also look a bit into it, because misreferencing the sources is also, or could be also, considered plagiarism. So many times we could be plagiarizing without knowing because of our mistake, so to say. So we need to, again, to avoid it, be very careful when referencing the authorship of other person's ideas, text, data, or figures. This is basically a summary of this. So the best way to avoid plagiarism is, again, to properly acknowledge the sources, and many times we think when we speak of acknowledging sources in academic works, we think of articles, we think of books, but we need to acknowledge sources or the authorship of sources regardless of their format or origin. So also if it's online on the internet, also if it's a picture, we will go to some examples later. And how do we properly acknowledge a source? Well, when we're writing our text, for example, we need to use citations. So we cite other people. It could be either a direct cite, so we're quoting exactly the words of someone, Or it could be an indirect citation. So we're using the ideas, the conclusions, the summaries of some other person, and we also need to acknowledge this. And in the end of the document, normally we will add a reference list with all the references. In each field, in each area of knowledge, there's different styles of acknowledging the sources, of citing and of creating references. So there's not only one way, but you need to know what exactly the most common style is used in your field, or what style is required in your, for example, if you're writing a paper for a journal, then you need to check what kind of style guide you would need to follow. So, for example, these are the most commons, and the most common in sciences. We have the ACS for chemistry, the IP for physics, but also AMS for mathematics, CSE for biology, and there's many more. In social sciences, the most common one is the APA, the American Psychological Association, and one of the most common citation styles, but also we have in other styles like Harvard, that is used in some studies of economy and business, Chicago in many humanities studies, then we have the IEEE for engineering, and the MLA for linguistics and literature. But then again, it's necessary to check with your tutor or your professors what is the style that you need to use. In each one of these styles, you will see that there are some guidelines on how to make citations and how to make references. Again, just to clarify and to be clear, a citation is normally what goes in the text as a direct citation or an indirect citation, and the reference goes in the end of the paper, of the work, and it's a complete reference of the source. So it has all the information that we need to identify the resource. We're going to look at some examples, as we said. So, for example, let's imagine we want to reference or to acknowledge the authorship of a book. In this case, it's a study of language by George Yule. So there's this text that we want to directly quote in our work, and we have down the reference of the book. So how would it look like in a real case? In an in-text citation, so a direct citation, we would put our text in quotation marks. And in this case, we're assuming we're using the APA style, but it could be another one. We're putting the author's second name in parentheses with the year of publication of the book and the page. And below, for example, you have the reference that would go in the end, where we have all the information that we need to identify the resource. So we have the second name, the initial, the year, the title of the book, the edition, that is optional in this case, and the publishing details, and permanent identification, DOI. This will vary again from style to style, so this is just an example. Again, just to be a bit insistent on this, but when we're citing, when we're acknowledging the authorship of someone else's, it's not only for books or for articles in journals. It's for any idea or anything we take from someone else's. It's also for information online. I have here a screenshot of, for example, of the APA style website, where you see like there's guidelines on how to cite and create references for TikTok videos. There's basically for everything. No? In most of the styles, they're very updated, so you'll find information on how to cite a blog post or a tweet. So anything that we find online or offline needs to be referenced, and in this style books, there's normally explained how to deal with these formats. I have here two more examples. We're not going to go into details, but just so you can see this, how it would look in real cases. This is, for example, a press release that is published online from the OECD. So we can make the full reference and the citation. That's no issue, because we can check again in the APA, in this case APA guidelines, how to quote, how to cite press release. In this case, for example, is a blog post. It can also be referenced. No, that's no issue, let's say. And the last example that, or the last case that we wanted to mention, is about multimedia elements. So when we say multimedia, it's basically images, videos, and music. Images, videos, music, any other graphic or audiovisual element is also protected by intellectual property law and needs to be used according to the law. It's a bit different in this case when we are using the whole video or the whole image in our work. We need to check that this is allowed. So each image or video or multimedia element has to have a license, and what we recommend is to look for resources that are licensed under Creative Commons, like you would find this kind of logos on the resource, so on the source, or that are in the public domain. So there are some databases online where you can see, for example, openly licensed or images with Creative Commons license or images in the public domain. So look for these databases, because many times we think that just because it's online we can use it without any restriction, but it's not the case. And even in these cases, even when we're using the public domain resources or the Creative Commons resources, we need to acknowledge the source and the authorship. And to conclude, we wanted to share with you some tools that may be useful for detecting plagiarism. There are several tools in the market. You probably have heard of some, but for example, this is Authenticate by Crossref. There's another very famous one that is called Turnitin, that identifies if a text has been taken from somewhere else. And in the case of pictures, this is a very interesting resource, TinEye, where you can upload or paste an image URL, and it looks for it on the internet, and it returns the first appearance of this image. This is useful not only for detecting plagiarism, but to when you want to use a picture and you're not sure about the authorship or about the licenses. The best thing is to go to the original source where it was first published and see if it was published with an open license or by whom it was published, to check if it's possible to use it. And of course, in case you have a doubt, you can ask a librarian here in the UNED, or in general, you can contact us by email. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed this video lesson.